Okay, it's time to get started. Thank you everyone for joining our live lecture today. My name is Isaac and I'll be the lead instructor for the lecture. And today's topic will be mobile development. So a couple things to mention before we get started today. The first one being is that we're going to stop periodically throughout this lecture to open the floor for questions. So if you do have those come up along the way, we just ask that you wait until those designated times to ask them. Another thing to mention is that we're recording this lecture. So once we're done here, we're going to post it on our YouTube channel and make that link available to you in your student resources. So diving right in, let's go ahead and first talk about the different kinds of mobile development there are today. Okay, and so there's two primary approaches to mobile development today. The first one is native, and that's where an application is written in the device's native language. Okay, so the most two popular platforms today we see are iOS and Android. And iOS is written with Swift, and Android is written with Java. Okay, and so this is kind of the old school approach to it because if you wanted to deploy to multiple platforms, you'd have to write two different code bases. Okay, and then we have a second kind of approach, which is called hybrid or a cross-platform app. And it's essentially a small website running in a browser shell and an app that has access to the native platform layer. Okay, so this diagram here on the right is like a hybrid app where we use technologies such as HTML, CSS, JavaScript, right, web-based technologies to deploy to these various platforms on mobile. Okay, and so this is the kind of approach we're going to be learning today is hybrid mobile app development. Not only is it faster because we only have to write one code base, but it's overall a lot easier to learn too than these native approaches. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's talk about what technology we're going to be learning to build our mobile app, or using, I should say. And Cordova is the first one, and it's an open source mobile development framework, and it allows you to use standard web technologies like HTML, CSS, JavaScript for your web development or mobile development, I should say. So let's go ahead and take a moment to look at the official documentation, right? We just come here if you want to learn anything about Cordova and the various platforms it supports. Okay, and then we're going to be using Ionic as well, which is an open source UI framework for hybrid mobile app development. Okay, so this is going to add a face to our application, and so we're going to be able to have buttons and all that kind of stuff with Ionic. Okay, and they've built a bunch of pre-built components which make things really, really easy for us. Okay, so that being said, let's go ahead and take a moment to discuss one restriction when it comes to hybrid mobile app development, and that is if you want to write a native or if you want to write a native or cross-platform app in iOS, then you have to use a Mac computer so you have access to Xcode. Okay, and so that being said, we're going to be using Android. We're going to be building an Android app today, and that way anyone following this tutorial can go ahead and follow along regardless of what machine type you have. So first thing is, let's install Cordova on our machine. And we're going to be using the Node Package Manager to do this, or NPM. Okay, so if you don't have it installed on your machine, you simply run the command node, or not node, npm install -g, and that stands for global, Cordova. Okay, and I'm not going to actually run it because I already have it installed on my machine. But if you don't have it installed, you'll want to run this command. Okay. And then once it's installed on your machine, we can go ahead and we can generate and quickly scaffold together a new Cordova app without having to do it completely from scratch ourselves. Okay, and so how we can do this is using the Cordova command line tool by running the command Cordova create. Okay, and then because we're creating a Android app, we need to go ahead and specify the three different package specifications, right? Okay, so we're going to call it Hello World. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and run the URL for this app, which will be com hello world, or scratch that, .com example hello world. Okay, and then from here we can go ahead and we can specify the name as hello world. Okay, and that's going to scaffold it together for us on our desktop right here. So we'll just give that a minute to execute. Okay, so from here, we can go ahead and change directories into Hello World. Okay, and let's go ahead and open this up in our text editor just so we can see what's going on inside of this starter app. Okay, so just give it a minute, boot on up. Okay, so as we can see here, we have a section for platforms, and right now it's empty, but we can then add configuration for different platforms so our app is compatible with various different platforms. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add the Android platform for this. Okay, and so how we're going to do that is we're just going to run the command, or actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and let's run this in our browser. Okay, and to do this, I'm just going to use HTTP server. If you don't have HTTP server, you can install it for free by just running npm-g install HTTP server. Okay, and from here, I'm just going to boot it up at port 8080. Okay, so let's go ahead and navigate there to localhost 8080, and we'll click www. As we can see, it wants to connect to a device, but we haven't set up any platforms, right? Any configuration for that, okay? And so that's where we're going to go ahead and we're going to install the platform configuration for Android, and then we're going to use Android Studio to emulate our program on a virtual device. Okay, so to start off, let's go ahead and let's run Cordova add, or I did that backwards, Cordova platform add Android -- save and enter. Okay, and so from here, it's going to go out and get all the configuration we need for the Android platform. Okay, so we'll just give it a minute to add all those modules and components. Okay, so it looks like it brought that in. Next, we need to bring in Android Studio. And if you don't have Android Studio, you can go ahead and go online and install for free. And once you've installed Android Studio, you'll also need to install Java and the Java development kit, okay? And that way we can actually use everything in Android Studio. So once you've done all that, we can go ahead and we can open up Android Studio. Okay, so as you can see, I just got right here in my applications. So I'm just going to give it a minute to boot on up. There it goes. Looks like it's almost done booting up here. Okay, so from here, let's go ahead and tell to start a new Android Studio project. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call my application my app. Okay, say next. Use the most recent version. Click next, and I'll just go with the default empty activity. From here, it's going to ask me to name my activity. I'll just keep it with the default main activity. And then I'll give it a second to go ahead and finish up. So it's going to take a minute, and it's going to build our application up for us. Okay, so let's give it a minute to do that. Okay, I'm just going to close these tips. I don't really care about those. Then we'll just let these processes down here finish on up. Okay, great. So as you can see, we're all set up. And so from here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up my Android Virtual Device Manager. You can find it up here under AVD Manager. So we'll go ahead and click on that. And then we will select our virtual device. Now you can see here, I already have one set up. If you don't have one, you can just click this button right here to create a virtual device. And then you'll just pick things like the phone type and the brand and the model and all that kind of stuff, just depending on what you want. I've just chosen a standard Android phone here. Okay, so from here, I just need to click on play. Okay. From here, it's going to launch our Android virtual. Okay, but our program's not going to be launched to it quite yet. We got to build our program first. We'll do that here in a minute. For now, let's just give our virtual device a moment or two to boot up, and we'll go from there. Okay. Looks like it's got power now. All right. Got a little boot up screen running now. We'll just give it a minute or so more to finalize everything. Okay, so now we can run our build command. So I'm going to just simply run the command Cordova build. Okay, and then that way it'll be ready to deploy to this Android virtual device. Okay, so we'll just give it a minute or two to build our source code. Okay. So I'm sure you picked up by now that with mobile development, there's a lot of waiting, a lot of installing involved, and a lot of compiling and building of different code. And it's just much more rigorous process than your simple browser-based development, where that's all you have to worry about. Mobile development can be a little more tedious and a little more lengthy as far as the time goes. But it also adds value to you as a software engineer to be able to work through those long wait periods and things of that nature. All right, so we'll just finish up its process here. Okay, it looks like it says the build was successful. So from here, once it's done filing here, we can go ahead and we can launch it on our device here. So we'll just give it a minute to wrap up, and we will be ready to see our device or our program in action on the device. Okay, so from here, we're ready to run the command Cordova run Android. Okay, now we will deploy our program through this virtual device, at which time we can, start building and see how it would run on that particular platform and device. Okay, so as you can see now, we're getting a different message, right? It's not saying trying to connect the device, it's letting us know device is connected, right? Device is ready. You can start writing your logic for this program and it will be ready to run, okay? So now we know how to set up a base project using Cordova. Let's go ahead and open up the floor and let's see if anyone has any questions over what we've been over so far. Okay, so the floor is open. If you have questions, feel free to ask those now. Okay, I don't hear any questions, so I'm going to assume everyone's okay so far. So let's go ahead and let's move on to the topic of Ionic. Okay, so start off, I'm just going to close out of Android Studio. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to use our, we're going to use npm to install Ionic. Okay, so similar fashion, we're going to say npm install -g Ionic. Okay, and I'm not going to run this command because I already have it installed on my machine. But if you don't have it installed, make sure you do run this command to get it installed globally. Then once you have it installed, we can go ahead and change directories onto our desktop, and we can make a new Ionic app. Okay, so how we can do this is I'm simply going to say Ionic start, and then we set up the name of the app, which maybe I'll just say as my app. Okay, and then from here, it's going to scaffold together an Ionic app right on our desktop for us. Okay, so we'll just give it a minute to do that. So from here, it's asking us which starter kit we want. And I'm just going to pick the default one, tabs, because it's the most basic. And we really don't want too much extras if we don't, we can help it. Okay, so this is going to take a few minutes because not only is it setting up your Ionic logic, but it's also setting up Cordova. Okay, so everything we just did, with this first app, it's actually going to do everything like that again, except we don't have to use the Cordova command line tool. We can just use the Ionic command line tool and it will bring in Cordova for us. Okay, so it's taking care of a lot of heavy lifting for us in this short command. So that's why it's going to take a good few minutes to complete. So that being said, let's just go ahead and give it the time needed to wrap up the process. Okay, so it looks like we got the npm install command done. Now it's just running this next one for us. Let's give a minute to finish those up. Okay, and we'll just go ahead and use the default answer for this. Okay, so now I can change directories into my app, and let's open that up in our text editor, see what that looks like. Okay, so as you can see, very similar setup to our Cordova app, except, got a little extra here for the Ionic configuration. Okay, so to run this, we can simply run the command Ionic serve. Okay, and it's going to serve it in a browser emulator for us. So let's give it a minute to run that. Okay, looks like it's running on local port for us. Okay, so we come on over and we click inspect, and let's just pick the phone emulator here. And as we can see, we get an emulation of the program. And now our user actually has an interface to work with, right? So from here, the question comes, well, how do I change this interface? How do we customize it and make it our own? Well, that is pretty simple. We just need to go to the source. And then as we can see in the index.js, we have the main build, okay, the Ion app here, okay, and that's where our different pages are being served from. Okay, so let's just go to the home page, for example. We can see that the text here matches the text here. So if we wanted to change this up, we could do something like this. We could simply maybe just erase everything back here, put an H1, we could say hello world, right, just to see. So we save all, and we refresh, and oh, looks like I messed up somewhere. Oh, let's go ahead and try to run this again. Alex serve. Okay, so it's running again. Okay, so as we can see, now we're getting hello world instead of the previous text was there. And it's really that simple because you know HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, you can simply plug those in now to add images or buttons or wherever else we want really, and configure it just like we would a browser-based application, except now we're configuring it for mobile. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's open up the floor one more time, and let's see if anyone has any last questions before we wrap up today. Okay, so the floor is open. If you have questions, feel free to ask those now. Okay, I don't hear anyone, so I'm assuming all is good on your end. So thank you everyone for coming on by. Have a great rest of your day, and happy coding out there.